Hello to the pessimistic, optimistic, and everyone in between. My name is Connor Philippi, and welcome back to the Minnesotan Sports Podcast. And after the disappointment of week one of the season, if no one watched my raw reaction to the Vikings loss to the Bucks, I was there at the stadium week one, so excited to start off the Viking season, and we all were let down by that game. And now, goody us, we now get to go right to the Eagles, a short week after a rough loss, second week of the season against the best team in football, and some injury concerns with them right off the bat that we're going to dive into. But this is a game that all Vikings fans are just kind of terrified to watch at this point because we could start off the season at 0-2. If we lose this one, just kind of looking into the future, we'd then play the Chargers, Panthers, and Chiefs, which means there's a good chance that we'd probably go 1-4 throughout the entire stretch. So the Vikings, I mean, I'm not going to give up hope if the Vikings lose this game. I am going to start to lose hope, though, if we get crushed in this game. If we can somehow hang with these guys, then, get some positives going into the rest of the season. Then we can kind of see how it goes against some of the easier teams we face and just see what this team is made of, basically. But this is a big game for the Vikings. Regardless if we win or not, this is going to say a lot about us. And going into this game, the Eagles are coming in as 7-point favorites. These are two teams that in recent memory have had a lot of battles between each other. The most memorable one, of course, being the Foles versus Keenum game in the NFC Championship game in 2018, where the Eagles absolutely routed the Vikings 38-7 and went on to win the Super Bowl that year. That was the year that the Vikings could have hosted the Super Bowl in their own stadium, weren't able to do it. Just one of the roughest losses in Vikings history. And then just recently, just last season, we played the Eagles again in the second week of the season, just like this season, except it was Monday night that week, that year, and they just routed us. It was like 24-7, I think the final score was, but it felt a lot less close than that. The goal for this game is, first of all, just make it a little closer than that game because it was a lower scoring game than it could have been. The Eagles probably could have ended up winning that game by a worse margin than the Cowboys beat us. So we just need to improve on that and show the fans something, show the NFL something that we're still capable of fighting after a rough loss to the Bucks, because I think we definitely were good enough to beat the Bucks that game. We shot ourselves in the foot too many times, but now comes the big test of how are we going to play against a really good team. So key injuries going into this one, we have Garrett Bradbury, questionable right now with a back injury. He's a guy that I have less confidence will play. And then we got Christian Darrisaw, which God help us if Darrisaw is out of this game. I mean, we already are going to have plenty of interior offensive lineman struggles, like I'll mention. But if Darrisaw gets hurt, we're screwed. And there's no way around it. He's really one of the only lines of defense that Kirk Cousins has left at this point, besides O'Neal, who O'Neal had one of the highest offensive lineman grades of the entire league this last week. So the two on the sides are huge for us, and Darrisaw potentially being out would be really bad. But Darrisaw played the entire game, so I feel like that's less concerning of an injury, but we will monitor it as we go into tomorrow's game. And then we have Davenport also questionable. And then on the Eagles side, Nakobe Dean was placed on the injured reserve. He was, I don't want to say he was a vital part of their defense by any means, but he also wasn't a bad player, so still a rough loss for them. And then we have some of the bigger names. So Fletcher Cox, he is questionable, but all signs are pointing towards, he should be fine. He had a little bit of some sort of rib thing, or took a shot in the game. I don't think it's going to end up being an issue based on what I've heard. And then we have James Bradbury, who is a fairly important piece in their secondary. He is questionable also. He's in concussion protocol, so there's actually a good chance he might not play in this game. And then we have Kenneth Gainwell, who's also questionable, didn't practice on Tuesday, and he has a injury with his ribs. So both teams having some players that are fairly important to them. Obviously, Fletcher Cox, if he was out, would be a huge blow to the Eagles, but again, not looking like he'll be out. So kind of kind of a back and forth in terms of who has a worse injury situation. For the depth of the Vikings and how little depth they have in the offensive line, I would argue that their situation is worse. Moving on now to keys of the game. The very first one, we all know what it is. Eagles fans know it, Vikings fans know it. Will Kirk survive this game? The way the offensive line played against the Bucs, and the Bucs defensive line is very good, don't get me wrong. The Bucs defensive line was the reason they won that game, but the Eagles defensive line is even better. And the Vikings offensive line potentially got worse. Even with Darisaw being in, though, if he ends up playing, we still have some issues because we might have Austin Schlottmann playing in place of Garrett Bradbury, and I know he didn't play that great to begin with, but I'm still more confident in Bradbury than Schlottmann at this point. But the main concern is Jalen Carter going up against Ed Ingram. That matchup between those two might just be the death of Kirk Cousins. He might I'm genuinely concerned about the health of Kirk Cousins at this point. He's going to take so many shots in this game. We're going to be lucky if Kirk Cousins can get out of this game in one piece. And if he does, thankfully he has a full week and a half to recover after this game. But then we got the Chargers defensive line, which also is no joke. So rough start to the season for sure for Kirk Cousins in terms of protection. But that's going to be the main issue. We know the Vikings offensive line is going to struggle mightily against this Eagles defensive line. Can the offensive line at least stay afloat enough, stay alive enough for Kirk Cousins to be able to get to one of his targets? And speaking of one of his targets, the second key to the game is Justin Jefferson versus Darius Slay 2.0. Last year we saw this same matchup in week 2 of the season where Jefferson, it was a big anticipated matchup, and Jefferson got shut down by Darius Slay. And yes, you gotta admit, Slay did have some help. He did get some double coverage every once in a while, but still, Darius Slay won that matchup. He played better than Jefferson did in that game. So Justin Jefferson had this matchup circled for a long time, and I hope he has a really good game and proves everyone wrong that, oh, Darius Slay owns Justin Jefferson. Put those rumors to rest. If Jefferson can have as productive of a game in this game as other games, the Vikings might be able to potentially stay in this one. And then the other side of that coin is the third key to the game. Can the rest of the offense perform if Justin Jefferson struggles? I'm hoping that he has a good game, and maybe he still will, but if there's parts of the game where there's a lull, and I'm sure there will because Slay is a heck of a cornerback, and this secondary in general is really good. And on top of that, this pass rush is going to make things difficult for Justin Jefferson to get open consistently. So can Hawkinson, Addison, KJ, can they take the load off of Jefferson? Because they did it in this last game, and the main issue was the offensive line not even giving them opportunities to get open, but they definitely could still have done a better job of helping Justin Jefferson out. We saw Addison's ability to make big plays. He had his first touchdown of his career in that game, and we know he can go deep and make plays. So let's see that from Addison. Let's see him try and sneak through. I think that regardless of what we have in front of us, and this is kind of bleeding into the next point of the game, we also need to just take more risks in general. And I think that can be said about the wide receivers, tight ends, and Kirk Cousins. Just on a 3rd and long, just throw the ball down there. See what happens. If it gets picked off, fine. That's the same thing as a punt. Just, even if you've got the defensive line barreling down on you, just let it loose. And maybe you'll get a long interception return, even for a touchdown. If that happens once, I mean, just anything is better than Kirk either getting sacked or him just throwing a check down for a loss of 2. Neither of those things are going to benefit us. So just take risks. Get it down the field as deep as you can. Try some deep shots. Just try and be a more explosive offense because we know the Vikings are capable of that. And the second to last key to the game here is, can Alexander Mattison get going? That's going to be a huge factor also for this offense because this defensive line is going to be hounding the passing attack all game long, and we need to establish the run early in this game. Otherwise, if the Eagles anticipate the pass most of the time in this game, it's going to be rough for us. We need to have that attack. We need to have a consistent threat that we're going to be able to run it up the middle, and it's going to be really tough to do it against one of the best running defenses in the league as well as passing defenses in the league, but it's something we're going to have to figure out how to do if we're going to win this game. And then finally, the defense just in general needs to perform for us again. We took a lot of risks in week one. I love the risk we took. I think we made Baker Mayfield uncomfortable throughout that game. And, Jalen Hurts didn't have a very good game last week. And he didn't end up needing to, as the Eagles defense was able to lock it down against the Patriots. But a very good Eagles offense ended up kind of starting off slow, and if we can continue to make them uncomfortable, to prevent them from establishing things and getting into that groove that we know they eventually will get into later on in the season, if we can prolong that one more week by jumping on them early, that's going to be a big factor for potentially not shutting down by any means, but at least slowing down this offense. It's kind of the equivalent of in cartoons or in, sitcoms where you'd see like a little kid like holding onto the leg of the parent, and the parent would be like just trying to like lug this weight and shake it off of them. The Vikings need to do that in the first half. Just hang on for dear life in the first half. Do what you can to try and get some big plays in the second half and take control and win the game. I think that's the only chance the Vikings have. My prediction is the Vikings lose this one 21-31. For some reason, I get the feeling that the Vikings actually will be able to hang in there for at least a couple quarters of football. I feel like they're going to get off to a strangely decent start against this team. The Eagles might start off a little bit slow offensively, and this game might be close to tied at halftime. And then after that, the Eagles are just going to kind of pile it on. Defensive line is going to get going and come at us with even more of a fury, and I think it'll be over from there. I don't think it'll be as much of a beatdown as last year, but I think it's just because the game plan or the game flow of this game will kind of just be slow in the first half. The Eagles will get going. So let me know what you think of your predictions of this game. Let me know if there's anything in the comments that you think I missed about what's going to be important with this game. Regardless of who we're playing and how concerning it's going to be to watch them play, we still get to watch Vikings football a few days before we normally would get to. That's good news. I'd still rather have football back and watch the Vikings struggle than not have football. So we got to look at it that way. But thanks so much for watching this video again. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the flip side.